Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we step into Anchorage in the winter of 1924, where snow lies deep against the station walls and cold presses at every window like a pale, patient hand. You stand beneath a weak electric lamp, listening to steam hiss from a waiting locomotive while flakes drift through the yellow light somewhere beyond the platform. Spruce trees vanish into darkness, and farther north, the rails disappear beneath a sky full of snow. It looks wonderfully romantic, provided you ignore the fact that you probably won't survive this without wool, hot coffee, and a suspiciously cheerful attitude. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you are listening from, along with your local time now. Dim the lights. You draw your coat tighter and step toward the train. The first thing you notice is the sound. Steam breathes from valves in slow white clouds. Couplings clink. Boots scrape over frozen boards. A porter calls to a baggage handler, his voice softened by falling snow. The locomotive gives a low mechanical sigh, as if it has already decided that this journey will be unnecessarily difficult. Anchorage is still a young town in 1924. It has grown from a construction camp into a rough northern community because the Alaska Railroad needs a headquarters and a route into the interior. The railroad, completed as a federally owned line in 1923, links Seward in the south with Fairbanks in the north. It is more than a convenience. It is a steel promise that freight, mail, workers, officials, and hopeful travellers can move through country that has never cared much about human schedules. You approach the sleeper car with your ticket tucked inside your coat. A conductor in a dark uniform checks it beneath the lamp. Glancing from the printed destination to your face, he has the calm expression of a man who has seen travellers bring too much luggage, too little clothing, and far too much confidence. "Fairbanks," he says. You nod. He pauses and looks toward the thickening snow. "We'll do our best. This is not quite the reassurance you imagined." You climb the narrow steps. The brass handrail bites cold even through your glove. Then the door closes behind you, and the world changes. The wind becomes a muffled murmur. The air smells of coal smoke, damp wool, old leather, soap, and something faintly cooked from farther along the train. Heat rises from pipes near the floor. It is uneven heat, gathering in warm pockets and abandoning other corners, but after the platform it feels luxurious. A porter takes your bag. The sleeping car is narrower than modern imagination would prefer. Polished wood panels catch the lamplight. Heavy curtains hang beside the berths. Frost gathers at the edges of the windows, framing each pane with white feathers. You pass passengers preparing for departure. A woman in a fur-trimmed hat settles a hat box beneath her seat. A travelling salesman rearranges sample cases and complains softly about the timetable. Two mining men sit opposite each other, their faces weathered, their boots marked with old mud and fresh snow. A mother tries to persuade a sleepy child that the train is exciting. Your compartment is compact, almost startlingly so. By day, it offers a cushioned seat, a facing bench, a folding table, hooks for clothing, and a netted rack above. By night, it will become a sleeping space through hinges, straps, curtains, and optimism. The porter places your bag beneath the seat and shows you the latch, the lamp, and the call button. He points out the washroom at the end of the car, where water may or may not remain cooperative in freezing weather. One quirky detail of cold weather rail travel is that passengers sometimes carried hot water bottles, heated stones, or even wrapped bricks to warm their beds. You have no heated brick tonight. You have railway bedding and faith. You remove your gloves and flex your fingers. Sensation slowly returns. The window beside you radiates cold when you lean closer. Your breath clouds the glass. Here, hiding the platform outside, you wipe a circle clear with your sleeve. Families stand beneath the lamps. A baggage cart rolls past, Wheels knocking over uneven boards, sacks of mail are loaded into another car. Wooden crates marked for stores farther north disappear into the freight section. In a territory where communities lie scattered across enormous distances, a train carries far more than passengers. It brings newspapers, medicine, tools, canned food, machine parts, and letters from relatives. Historians still argue whether the Alaska Railroad should be understood mainly as a bold public investment, a tool of federal control, or a practical lifeline that transformed settlement in the territory. All three views can be true at once, which is inconvenient for anyone hoping history will sit quietly in one labelled box. The porter returns with folded blankets. They are thick, grey, and slightly rough. He places them neatly on the seat, then adjusts the curtain with a quick tug. His work is part hospitality and part engineering. On a sleeper train, comfort must be assembled every evening and folded away every morning. You ask whether the weather is likely to worsen. He glances toward the window. It's winter. Another excellent reassurance. The train gives a sudden jolt. Somewhere ahead, the locomotive releases a sharper burst of steam. The salesman checks his watch as if the railroad might apologize to him personally. Outside, snow sweeps along the platform in twisting ribbons. Station lamps become blurry halos. The rails shine black for a few yards, then vanish beneath white. You imagine the route north, through forests, beside rivers locked under ice, past isolated settlements where a whistle in the night might be the loudest sound heard for hours. A final baggage door slams. The conductor walks them through the car, steady and formal, calling that departure is near. You settle against the cushion. Your coat stays on. Nobody sensible removes too many layers until the heating system proves that it intends to remain loyal. The child across the corridor presses both hands to the glass. His mother gently pulls them away before they stick. Then the bell sounds. It is not loud, but it changes the mood completely. Goodbyes finish. Hands lift on the platform. The locomotive pulls against the cars, and each coupling answers in sequence with a deep metallic knock. The sleeper shivers. Your lamp trembles. The floor moves beneath your boots, very slowly. Anchorage begins to slide past the window. The people on the platform drift backward into snow and steam. The station roof disappears. Dark buildings pass, their windows glowing warmly. Beyond them waits the open winter, wide, silent, and entirely uninterested in whether your berth is comfortable. You listen as the wheels find their rhythm. Not yet a lullaby, but close. The rhythm settles beneath you as the train gathers speed, and the narrow compartment reveals itself one detail at a time. At first it seems merely small, then, as your eyes adjust to the amber lamp and shifting shadows, you realize that every inch has been assigned a duty. The seat beneath you is upholstered in dark fabric, firm enough to survive years of boots, luggage, and restless travellers. Opposite it, another bench folds and locks with clever catches. Above, a padded panel waits to become the upper berth. Brass hooks line the wall. A netted rack sags slightly under hats, scarves, and a rolled blanket. There is no wasted space. Because railway designers have apparently decided that human beings are happiest when arranged like carefully packed parcels. You test the window latch. It does not move. That is probably for the best. Outside, snow streaks sideways across the glass. Inside, frost has crept along the edges in delicate white branches. You rest 2 fingers against the pane and feel the cold press through immediately. Near the floor, a heating pipe runs along the wall. It clicks, knocks, and occasionally gives a metallic ping. Steam heat is common on passenger trains of this period. Carried through pipes linked across the cars, when it behaves, the compartment becomes pleasantly warm when it does not. Passengers learn the spiritual value of wool. You remove your outer coat and hang it from a hook. Melted snow darkens the shoulders. The compartment smells of damp cloth, varnished wood, coal smoke, and dry linen. Each turn of the wheels sends a vibration through the wall, like the pulse of an enormous mechanical animal. The porter returns and begins preparing the berth. You watch with the attention usually reserved for stage magic. He pulls a latch, lowers the padded section, unfolds a mattress, smooths a sheet, and tucks the corners with swift movements. The upper berth descends from the wall on straps and hinges. Curtains slide along brass rods, creating a private enclosure that is private mostly because everyone politely agrees not to look through the gaps. The bedding is simple: white sheets, a thin pillow, 2 wool blankets, dense and slightly scratchy. A heavier cover lies folded at the foot. You press a hand against the mattress. It gives a little, then stops. Luxury. In 1924 is a flexible term. A mainstream factor of sleeping car history is that the Pullman Company shaped American rail travel for generations, setting expectations for berths, porter service, dining, and overnight comfort. Not every sleeper in Alaska is a classic Pullman car, but the influence is unmistakable. Folding berths, curtained sections, polished fittings, and attentive service belong to a wider railway culture that has taught passengers to sleep while moving through darkness. The porter places a small towel beside your things and points toward the washroom. You decide to inspect it before the corridor fills. The passage sways beneath your feet. One hand remains on the wall as you move, because dignity is harder to maintain when a carriage leans unexpectedly around a curve. At the end of the car, you find a compact washroom with a metal basin, mirror, water tap, soap dish, and narrow shelf. The mirror trembles so constantly that your reflection appears mildly nervous. You turn the tap. A thin stream of water emerges, very cold and slightly metallic in smell. You splash your face. The chill wakes every thought you had hoped to leave behind in Anchorage. Railroad washrooms of the era offer convenience but not elegance. Plumbing can freeze, water tanks can run low, and sanitation arrangements are practical rather than delicate. On many trains, signs warn passengers not to use certain facilities while standing in stations, a reminder that early railway systems often release waste directly onto the track below. It is a detail best considered briefly, then placed far away from thoughts of dinner. A quirky traveller's habit is to bring a personal wash kit containing tooth powder, a folding cup, a comb, scented soap, and sometimes a tiny bottle of smelling salts. The salts are meant for fainting, headaches, or emotional excess. You suspect they might also help after visiting the washroom on a rough curve. Back in your compartment, you arrange your belongings: boots beneath the seat, gloves near the pipe, hat on the rack, ticket in your coat. A pocket watch rests on the folding table. Though the train's movement makes it creep toward the edge, you move it back, and moments later it begins the journey again. The lamp gives off a steady golden glow. Electric lighting has become increasingly common in the passenger cars by this period, replacing older oil lamps and improving safety. Yet the light remains soft. It does not banish the darkness outside, it merely creates a small island within it. You sit on the lower berth and listen. The car speaks in layers. Wheels clatter over rail joints, glass rattles, wood panels creak somewhere nearby. A suitcase buckle taps against a wall. Farther down the corridor, the child asks a question, then another, then apparently discovers an unlimited supply. The train rocks from side to side. You begin to understand why some travellers sleep well on trains and others do not sleep at all. Scholars continue to debate whether sleeping cars made long-distance travel more democratic or simply created new layers of class distinction on wheels. A berth offers privacy, warmth, and rest, but only to those who can pay. Other passengers may sit upright through the night in coaches, wrapped in coats, trying to sleep while strangers shift beside them. Your compartment, modest as it is, now feels privileged. You pull the curtain halfway closed and sit within the enclosed space. Fabric softens the corridor noises. The lamp glows against the curtain. Your breath, blankets, and the faint scent of soap make the berth feel personal, as though the railway has loaned you a temporary room that will vanish by morning. You try lying down. The mattress is narrow enough for Mufas that turning over becomes a planned operation. Your shoulder nearly touches the wall. Above you, straps hold the upper berth in place, and for one passing moment you wonder how carefully those straps were inspected. A sensible question, not a restful one. You sit up and draw the curtain open. The porter moves along the corridor, checking latches and collecting stray items. His steps adjust naturally to the sway. He seems planted to the floor while everyone else moves like furniture in a mild earthquake. You ask whether the heat lasts through the night. He gives the pipe a listening tap, so long as the engine does. There it is again. That northern habit of answering honestly enough to be alarming. You place one blanket across your knees. Its fibres scratch through your trousers, but warmth gathers beneath it. Outside the frosted window, the last lights of Anchorage have disappeared. Only snow and darkness remain, rushing past too quickly to study. Your compartment is no grand hotel room. It has no private bath, deep mattress, silent walls, or thermostat, yet it contains everything that matters to night: a berth, a lamp, a blanket, a locked window, and a steel car wrapped around you. Ahead, the locomotive gives a long whistle. The sound travels backward through the train and out across the frozen lowlands. You feel the pull increase beneath the wheels, and the sleeper leans into the northern night. The pull strengthens until every coupling is drawn tight, and the gentle clatter beneath you becomes a firmer, steadier beat. Anchorage is now behind the train, though for several minutes the town refuses to disappear completely. A few isolated lamps still glow through the snow, suspended in the darkness like small golden beads. Then one slips away, followed by another, until the last human light is swallowed by the weather. You remain beside the window, watching your own reflection become clearer as the outside world grows black. The glass shows your face, the folded blanket, and the brass lamp trembling softly above your shoulder. Beyond that reflection, barely visible, snow spins through the locomotive's smoke. At the front of the train, the engine works with deliberate violence. Coal is shoveled into the firebox. Water boils inside the locomotive's boiler. Expanding steam drives pistons. The pistons turn rods, and the rods force the great wheels forward against the rails. The process sounds simple when explained calmly in a warm room. Up ahead, in the cab, it is heat, noise, weight, smoke, and constant attention. The fireman stands close to the open firebox door. Each time it swings wide, orange light floods the cab. He lifts another shovelful of coal, twists his body, and throws it across the flames. Good firing requires skill. Coal must be spread evenly so the fire burns hot without wasting fuel or producing too much smoke. A careless fire can lose steam pressure just when the locomotive needs power most. You cannot see him from your compartment, but you can sense the result. The train surges slightly, then settles. Steam hisses beneath the cars. The whistle sounds again, long and low, warning anything ahead that several hundred tons of machinery and humanity are moving through the storm. A mainstream fact about steam locomotives is that they require enormous quantities of both coal and water on a long northern route. Fuel and water stops are not optional comforts. They determine how far the train can travel and how hard the engine can work. In winter, keeping water available becomes even more troublesome, since tanks, pipes, and trackside supplies can freeze. The idea of a machine needing frequent drinks may seem almost charming. The quantity involved is less charming. The locomotive does not sip, gulps. Your sleeper sways as the track curves away from the settled edge of Anchorage. The rails run across low ground where snow has gathered in shallow waves. Wind lifts loose powder and sends it streaming over the track. From the window, it resembles smoke flowing along the earth. Inside, the temperature climbs. The heating pipe near your boots has become almost too warm to touch. You loosen your collar and glance toward the corridor. The travelling salesman has finally stopped adjusting his cases. He sits with a newspaper open beneath the lamp, though the rocking car makes the columns shift before his eyes. Across from him, one of the mining men removes a dented tin from his coat and pinches a little tobacco between his fingers. Smoking is common aboard trains in this period, divided by custom or designated spaces rather than modern expectations of clean air. Soon a thin scent of tobacco joins coal smoke, wool, leather, and hot metal. The child farther down the car announces that the train is moving very fast. His mother says it is not. He announces it again, more confidently. You decide he may have a future in public speaking. A sudden burst of sparks rises past the window. They glow red for a heartbeat, then vanish into the snow. Steam locomotives can throw cinders and embers from their stacks, especially when working hard. Passengers sometimes complain of soot entering through open windows, spotting clothing, bedding, and faces. A quirky tidbit from railway travel is that some passengers wear special dust coats or keep separate travelling clothes because coal smoke has little respect for elegance. Tonight, nobody opens a window. The cold has solved the soot problem with impressive efficiency. The train passes a dark cluster of buildings, perhaps a warehouse, maintenance shed, or workers' dwelling. Snow fills the spaces between them. A dog barks somewhere beyond the track, its voice faint through the glass. Then even that sound is gone. You imagine the locomotive crew peering ahead through narrow windows. Snow clings to the front of the engine and melts against warm metal. The engineer watches the rails, signals, curves, and any shape that might be an obstruction. Visibility is poor, but stopping distance is long. A train cannot simply step aside from trouble. It must trust its route, its crew, and the steel path beneath it. The conductor moves through the sleeper with a lantern in one hand. He checks a door at the end of the car, presses the latch, then looks briefly through the glass into the connecting vestibule. Cold air slips in around the frame, bringing a sharper smell of smoke and snow. You ask how soon the train will reach open country. He looks toward the black window. We're in it. Fair enough. Historians have long debated whether railroads conquered remote landscapes or merely created narrow corridors through places that remained largely beyond their control. From your seat, the second idea feels more convincing. The train occupies a thin strip of steel, warmth and lamplight. On either side lies an immense frozen country that continues without needing permission from schedules, engineers, or federal planners. The locomotive whistle calls again. This time the sound is shorter. Perhaps a crossing lies ahead, though no road or traveller is visible from your window. The note fades into the trees. Dark spruce begins to appear, first as scattered vertical shadows, then as a dense wall. Snow rests heavily on their branches. When the train's light reaches them, they flash into view and immediately fall behind. Each tree seems close enough to touch, then is gone before you can study it. You feel the speed more clearly now. Rail joints strike beneath the wheels in a measured pattern. Click, pause, click, pause. The sound repeats so regularly that your breathing begins to follow it. Coal is still being fed to the fire. Water is still boiling. Pistons are still driving rods through the storm. The entire train depends on thousands of small actions continuing correctly. A shovel lands where it should, a valve opens, a bearing stays cool, a switch remains clear of packed snow, a signal is seen, a coupling holds. Travel feels effortless only when somebody else is working very hard. The porter steps past, carrying a bundle of linen toward another compartment. He walks without touching the walls, his balance perfectly matched to the motion. You wonder how many nights he has spent listening to these same wheels and whether the rhythm still enters his dreams. Your own berth waits behind you, neatly made and curtained, but you are not ready to lie down. The departure still holds your attention. There is a strange moment in every journey when turning back remains imaginable. then suddenly does not. That moment has passed. Anchorage is no longer a place behind the window. It is a memory of lamps, frozen boards, waving hands, and a station roof fading into steam ahead. The line stretches north through darkness. The locomotive exhales a deep plume of smoke, and the train presses onward, carrying its small pockets of warmth into the frozen lowlands. The frozen lowlands open around you so gradually that, for several minutes, you hardly notice the change. The spruce trees begin to stand farther apart. Dark trunks no longer crowd the window in a single wall. Between them lie wide stretches of snow, flat and faintly blue beneath the night ski, with low brush bending under the weight of winter. You sit close to the glass, one shoulder against the wooden panel, and watch the landscape pass in fragments. A stand of black spruce appears, then a hollow filled with windblown powder, then a frozen channel, its surface pale and smooth, though hidden water may still move somewhere beneath the ice. The train's light reaches only a short distance ahead, beyond that narrow beam. The country remains unreadable inside the sleeper. Conversation has begun to gather. The two mining men have shifted closer together. Their heavy coats open now that the heating pipes are working. One has a square jaw and a scar along his cheek. The other is older, with pale eyebrows and hands thickened by the labour. Their voices remain low, but the carriage is quiet enough that phrases drift toward you between the sounds of the wheels. They speak of claims, freight prices, frozen ground, and a man who lost 3 dogs near the Kuskokwim. The travelling salesman lowers his newspaper. Lost them, Howie asks. The older miner shrugs. Never found them. This answer does not satisfy anyone, but it ends the subject. The woman with the hat box sits opposite the child and his mother. She has removed her gloves and now holds a small silver hand warmer between her palms. It gives off a faint metallic scent, mixed with the sharper smell of fuel. Pocket hand warmers existed in several forms by this period, some using charcoal sticks and others relying on liquid fuel. They were useful, but not always perfectly behaved. A traveller carrying one had to trust both the device and the lining of the coat pocket around it. You glance down at your own hands. The heating pipe is doing enough for now. The lowland country south and north of Anchorage includes broad glacial valleys, wetlands, rivers, and forests shaped by ice, water, and long winters. The railroad follows the paths that geography allows. Engineers cannot simply draw a straight line across Alaska and expect mountains. Rivers and unstable ground cooperate. The route must bend, climb, cross, and sometimes wait. Track crews know these difficulties intimately. Frozen ground can seem solid, then shift with the seasons. Snow fills cuts and covers switches. Spring thaw brings mud, water, and movement. A railway in Alaska is never finished in the comforting sense. It is maintained, repaired, defended, and persuaded. The train gives a quick sideways roll. The salesman catches his newspaper before it slides to the floor. Track, the younger miner says. The salesman looks offended, as though the track has behaved improperly on purpose beyond the window. A line of telegraph poles follows the rails. Each pole emerges from darkness, crosses your view, and disappears behind you. Wires sag between them, trembling in the wind. Telegraph service is one of the quiet companions of railway expansion. Messages can move ahead of the train, warning stations, reporting delays, arranging freight, and connecting distant settlements to administrative centres. For many communities, the line beside the track carries news before the train carries people. The child notices the poles and begins counting them. He reaches 9, loses track, and starts again from 3. No one corrects him. A smell of coffee drifts from farther down the train. This is weak coffee, perhaps reheated, but the scent changes the mood of the car. Several passengers look toward the corridor at once. Human civilization may be defined by many grand achievements. though the ability to smell coffee through 2 closed doors deserves consideration. The older miner reaches into his coat and produces a small cloth pouch. From it, he takes several pieces of dried fish and offers them around. The woman with the hat box declines. The salesman hesitates, then accepts one. You take a piece as well. It is salty, firm and smoky, with a flavour that lingers. Preserved fish has long been essential across Alaska, prepared through drying, smoking, freezing, and careful storage. Indigenous communities developed deep knowledge of seasonal fishing and preservation long before railroads arrived. Settlers, traders, miners, and railway workers also depended on foods that could survive distance and cold. The railway may carry canned goods and flour, but local knowledge remains more reliable than any timetable. Researchers remain divided over how much the railroad disrupted older patterns of travel and exchange compared with how much it simply added another route to an already complex network. Rivers, trails, coastal passages, dog teams, an indigenous travel system continue to matter. Steel rails did not erase them. They entered a landscape already crossed by generations of movement. The younger miner points toward the window. Moose country, he says. You lean closer, though there is almost nothing to see. For several moments, only snow and scattered trees pass. Then a shape appears near the edge of the train's light. It is tall, dark, and still. Long legs rise from the snow. A broad head turns slightly. The moose watches the train. The train does not slow. For one brief second, its body stands clear against the white ground, then darkness closes around it. The child sees it too and gives a delighted shout. His mother smiles, though she warns him not to press his face against the glass. Frost has thickened along the lower pane, and the cold radiating from it feels almost solid. Wild animals are common subjects of railway stories. Passengers speak of moose beside the track, bears near camps, wolves following distant ridges, and foxes darting across snow. Some accounts are accurate, others grow larger with every telling. A lesser-known habit among northern travellers is the collection of animal sightings as informal proof of a successful journey. A person returning south might remember the single caribou glimpsed at dusk more vividly than days of cold, delay, and bad food. Memory has always been a skilled editor. The older miner begins a story about a wolf that followed a sled team for 20 miles. The younger miner interrupts. It was 6:20 by the time we reached camp. That is not how distance works. It is how stories work. The car fills with quiet laughter. You settle deeper into your seat. The tension of departure has faded. Strangers now occupy the shared space more comfortably. Coats are unbuttoned. Hats rest on racks. Boots stretch into the aisle until the porter passes and nudges them back. The porter carries a tray with chipped cups and a metal pot. Coffee is poured carefully as the train sways. You accept a cup and hold it in both hands. Heat enters your fingers. Steam rises toward your face, carrying the bitter smell of grounds and scorched metal. The coffee is not good. It is also perfect. Outside, the frozen lowlands continue without apparent end. Small stands of spruce lean under snow. Open patches shine faintly beneath the sky. In places, wind has swept the ground nearly bare, revealing crusted ice and low vegetation. Elsewhere, drifts pile against the railway embankment. The whistle sounds ahead, distant from where you sit. You imagine a small crossing or maintenance point buried in darkness. Perhaps a worker hears the approaching engine from a cabin. Perhaps a dog lifts its head. Perhaps nobody is there at all, and the whistle passes over empty snow. There is still disagreement among historians about whether rail travel reduced the sense of isolation in Alaska or merely made isolation more visible. The train links towns and camps, but it also reveals the enormous spaces between them. Every mile of track shows you how little human settlement occupies this country. You sip the coffee slowly. The miners continue exchanging stories, The salesman offers one about a hotel room in Seattle, with bedbugs large enough to pay rent. The woman with the hatbox finally laughs. Even the conductor pauses to listen. The sleeper moves north through the dark, carrying tobacco smoke, damp wool, dried fish, hot coffee, and a collection of people who would not otherwise share the same room. Beyond the glass, the lowlands remain silent. Within the car, voices rise and fall gently over the rails, and the night begins to feel less empty. The smell of coffee lingers after the porter has carried the tray away, but another scent now drifts through the corridor, richer and more persuasive: roasted meat, warm bread, onions, and something sweet reach the sleeper in faint waves each time the connecting door opens. The travelling salesman notices first. "Dinner," he says, folding his newspaper with sudden purpose. The word moves through the car like an announcement from a benevolent government. You glance at the narrow passage leading toward the dining car. The train is still rocking steadily across the frozen lowlands, and every few moments the wheels strike a rough joint with enough force to make the lamps quiver. Reaching supper will require crossing between cars, which seems simple until you remember that the gap between them contains noise, cold, smoke, and several opportunities to lose your dignity. You stand, straighten your clothes, and follow the others. The corridor is warm and close, coats brush the walls. The woman with the hatbox moves ahead of you, one gloved hand resting lightly against the panelling. The salesman follows at her heels with the impatience of a man who suspects someone else may receive the better cut of meat. At the end of the sleeper, the porter opens the vestibule door. Cold air rushes in at once. The sound changes from a muted rhythm to a hard metallic roar. Steel plates shift beneath your boots. The two cars sway independently, joined by couplings and covered passageways that are practical but not entirely comforting. Snow blows through a narrow seam and melts against the floor. You grip the rail for a few seconds. You're standing between two moving rooms while the frozen world races beneath you. The porter waits on the other side, calm as ever. You step across. The dining car feels brighter than the sleeper. Electric lamps shine above tables dressed with white cloths. Silverware trembles in careful arrangements. Water glasses catch the light. Small curtains frame dark windows filled with snow. It is not a grand restaurant. Yet after the compact berth and smoky corridor, it seems almost elegant. A steward directs you toward a table shared with the two miners. The salesman is seated across the aisle, where he immediately begins studying the printed menu as if preparing for an examination. You slide into your chair. It is fixed to the floor, a sensible arrangement. Since ordinary furniture would be wandering through the carriage by now, a waiter places a folded napkin before you. His jacket is clean, his movements precise, and his balance astonishing. He carries plates while the floor rolls beneath him, never spilling more than a drop. Years of railway service have taught his body to anticipate every curve. Formal dining service became an important feature of long-distance American passenger travel during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Railroads used food, table linen, polished silver, and attentive staff to advertise comfort and refinement. Even in remote regions, a dining car could offer passengers the feeling that civilization had followed them onto the rails. The menu tonight is shorter than those found on famous eastern routes. Supplies in Alaska must travel great distances. Storage is difficult, and winter does not encourage unnecessary variety. Still, you are offered soup, roast beef, potatoes, canned vegetables, bread, coffee, tea, and a choice of preserved fruit or pudding. The younger miner orders roast beef. The older miner orders the same. You consider pretending to study the menu, then do likewise. Outside, the storm remains faint but persistent. Snow scrapes against the windows. Inside, spoons touch bowls with soft clinks, and the warm scent of soup fills the car. Your first course arrives in a shallow china bowl. The broth is hot, salty, and slightly cloudy. Pieces of onion float beside small cuts of carrot. You lift the spoon carefully as the train leans into a curve. Halfway to your mouth, the floor shifts, and the soup attempts to return to the bowl by an indirect route. The older miner watches without comment. His own spoon remains perfectly level. "You learn," he says. There is no cruelty in his voice, which somehow makes the remark worse. One peculiar dining custom aboard some trains involves filling cups and glasses only part way. This is not stinginess, though passengers may suspect otherwise. A full cup becomes a moving hazard, while a half cup has at least a modest chance of reaching its destination. Your water glass contains barely 3 swallows. Tonight, that seems generous. The waiter returns with the bread and butter. The bread is dense but fresh enough, with a browned crust and a soft centre. The butter is firm from cold storage. You press it across the bread, leaving pale ridges. Around you, passengers speak in low voices. A railway official discusses freight with a man in a fur collar. 2 women compare the quality of hotels in Seward and Anchorage. Near the far end of the car, a young soldier reads a letter between courses, folding and unfolding it along the same worn creases. Dinner aboard a train is never entirely private. Strangers share tables because space is limited. Conversation is expected, though not required. Names may be exchanged, or merely destinations. A person can reveal a life story between soup and pudding, then vanish at the next station. The older miner asks why you're travelling north. You give him the answer you have prepared. Simple enough to discourage further questions, but not so short that it sounds rude. He nods. Everybody has a reason. The younger miner cuts his bread. Some have 2, the real one and the one they tell. The waiter arrives with the main course before you need to respond. The roast beef is thinly sliced and covered in brown gravy. Potatoes sit beside it, soft at the edges, with canned peas arranged in a small green mound. The plate is hot enough to warm your hands through the china. You eat slowly. The beef is a little tough, the gravy is heavily salted. The peas have surrendered all the memory of gardens. Yet the meal feels deeply satisfying. Warm food changes the cold outside from a threat into scenery. Some researchers interpret dining cars as spaces of social mixing, while others emphasize the strict divisions they preserved. Race, occupation, wealth, and status shaped who served, who ate comfortably, and who could afford the experience at all. The polished table suggests equality among passengers seated together, but railway society carried many of the same inequalities found beyond the tracks. The waiter attending your table performs skilled work under difficult conditions. He memorizes orders, carries hot dishes through swaying aisles, manages impatient customers, and maintains a calm expression. Much of the comfort passengers praise depends on labour they barely notice. The train jolts sharply, cutlery jumps, a glass tips at the salesman's table and spills water across his menu. He lifts both hands too late, staring at the spreading stain as though witnessing a personal betrayal. The woman seated beside him offers her napkin. He accepts it with great solemnity. Nobody laughs until he does. By the time pudding arrives, the dining car has grown more relaxed. It is a pale baked custard with a dusting of nutmeg. The scent is sweet and warm. Coffee follows in thick cups set firmly into saucers. You hold the cup close and feel steam against your face. The windows are nearly black now. Frost rims the corners, and every passing reflection shows lamps, faces, white cloths, and hands moving carefully over plates. For a moment, the dining car seems suspended outside time, carrying its little supper party through a world of darkness. The younger miner tells you that north of here, meals become less predictable. The older miner corrects him. Meals stay predictable, they get worse. You smile into your coffee. When the steward announces the final seating, chairs begin to empty, napkins are folded, bills are settled, Coats are fastened again for the short passage between cars, and you rise reluctantly. The dining car has been warm, bright, and pleasantly ordinary. Leaving it means returning to the narrow corridor, the cold vestibule, and the sleeper waiting beyond. At the door, you look back once. Waiters clear plates with practiced speed. The lamps glow steadily. A spoon slides across an abandoned saucer as the train rounds another curve. Then the porter opens the vestibule, and winter breathes through the gap. You step carefully across, carrying the warmth of supper with you as darkness deepens beyond the windows. The vestibule door closes behind you, cutting off the sharp breath of winter, and the sleeper receives you again with its softer noises and warmer air. Supper remains with you in pleasant traces. Nutmeg, coffee, gravy, and warm bread linger beneath the stronger smells of coal smoke, damp wool, varnished wood, and the metal heat rising from the pipes. You move carefully along the corridor. The train has settled into a deeper rhythm now. It no longer feels as though it is leaving somewhere. It feels committed to motion, carrying you north with the patience of a clock that has no reason to hurry. Several passengers are already preparing for the night. The woman with the hat box stands beside her berth while the porter lowers the upper section above her. The salesman has removed his collar and placed it neatly beside his newspaper. One of the miners sits with his boots stretched toward the heating pipe, staring into the middle distance with the peaceful expression of a man who has eaten enough meat and no longer needs to discuss anything. The child is still awake. He has acquired a small wooden toy engine and pushes it along the edge of his seat, whispering sound effects to himself. His mother watches with tired affection. Each time the real train rocks, the toy tips over. Each time, he places it upright and continues. You return to your compartment and sit beside the window. Night has now fully claimed the landscape. The glass offers almost nothing beyond your reflection. Occasionally a drifted field catches the train's light and flashes pale beneath the darkness. A group of spruce trees appears for a second, branches heavy with snow, then slips behind you. Between these brief sights lie long stretches of blackness. Ice has thickened around the window frame. Fine crystals spread inward like ferns. Each pattern is delicate, intricate, and entirely accidental. Warm air inside the car meets the frozen glass, moisture collects, and the cold turns it into white lace. People often speak of frost as beautiful because they are viewing it from the warm side. That detail matters. You lean closer and hear the faint scratch of snow against the pane. The sound is almost too soft to notice beneath the wheels. Yet once you catch it, you hear it again and again. Tiny grains brush the glass. Wind moves along the side of the carriage. Somewhere above, loose ice taps against the roof. By the 1920s, electric lighting had become a familiar feature aboard many passenger trains, powered through systems connected to the train or individual cars. The lamps inside your sleeper are modest, but they transform the night journey. Earlier travellers had depended on candles, oil, or gas lighting, all of which carried obvious risks inside a wooden or partly wooden carriage. Electricity offers steadier light and fewer open flames, though railway wiring in winter still demands careful maintenance. The lamp beside your berth glows through a small shade, leaving the ceiling in shadow. Its light makes the compartment feel enclosed and private. Your folded coat hangs against the wall. Your bag rests beneath the seat. The blankets wait in a grey stack. These few objects now define your temporary world. Farther down the car, the porter begins turning daytime seats into beds. Latches click. Panels descend, sheets snap open with the soft, practice sounds. Curtain rings slide along brass rods. One by one, the sleeper changes from a public room into a row of narrow sleeping spaces. Conversations become quieter as fabric partitions appear. Shoes are removed. Watches are wound. Hairpins are set into small dishes. Letters are folded and tucked away. A lesser-known annoyance of overnight railway travel is the difficulty of keeping personal objects still. A comb, coin, cufflink, or spectacle case placed on a smooth surface may wander during the night. Experienced passengers wedge small belongings into corners, wrap them in cloth, or place them inside shoes. The train does not steal your possessions, it simply redistributes them. You secure your pocket watch inside your bag. The salesman fails to take similar precautions. A pencil rolls from his table, crosses the floor, and disappears beneath the opposite berth. He watches it go. For a moment, he seems to consider pursuing it. Then he sighs and decides that the pencil has chosen a new life. The conductor passes through, checking tickets and answering questions about the next stops. His lantern casts a moving glow over the walls. When he opens the connecting door, the roar of the rails grows louder, then fades again after the latch closes. You hear someone ask whether the train is on schedule. The conductor pauses. "We are moving," he replies, "in this weather." That appears to be the preferred measurement. Railway timetables promise order, but winter travel in Alaska follows a more complicated authority. Snow, ice, mechanical strain, and visibility can alter the best plan. Passengers may hold printed arrival times in their hands, but the landscape makes no agreement with the paper. There remains disagreement among historians over whether rigid railway time changed northern communities as deeply as it changed urban life elsewhere. In large cities, standardized time shaped factories, offices, and crowded stations. Across remote Alaska, seasonal light, river conditions, weather, and local necessity often remained more powerful than the clock. A train might introduce precise schedules, yet everyone understood that winter retained the final vote. You take off your shoes and place them beneath the berth with their toes facing outward. The floor is warm near the pipe and cool near the wall. Through your siks, you feel the carriage tremble. Each rail joint sends a faint beat through the soles of your feet. Click, click, pause, click, click. The pattern is not perfectly even. Sometimes it quickens, sometimes the train passes over a bridge and the sound becomes hollow and booming. Then the wheels return to packed earth and the familiar rhythm resumes. The child's whispering has stopped. You look into the corridor. His toy engine rests on the seat beside him, and his head has fallen against his mother's arm. She strokes his hair while the porter prepares their berth. The miners speak in murmurs about a river crossing farther north. Their words blur together beneath the steady clatter. One mentions overflow ice. The other mentions a dog team that reached a camp 3 days late. Neither sounds surprised. You draw the curtain partway and turn down the lamp. The glow softens. Shadows deepen around the compartment. Outside, the darkness becomes more complete, though now and then a distant patch of snow shines beneath the clouds. The train whistles. The note rises slowly, travels over the lowlands, and fades into the frozen distance. You imagine it reaching a cabin hidden among the spruce. Someone inside might pause beside a stove and listen. Perhaps they know the timetable. Perhaps they wonder who is travelling tonight. Perhaps the sound is so familiar that they barely notice it. Inside the sleeper, the whistle leaves a brief stillness behind. Then the small noises return. A blanket rustles. A pipe knocks twice. A berth creaks under shifting weight. The wheels continue their patient conversation with the rails. You lie back without fully closing the curtain. From the pillow, you can see a thin strip of corridor light and the pale edge of the frozen window. The mattress presses firmly beneath you. The wool blanket rests heavy across your legs. Sleep does not arrive yet, but it moves closer. The motion begins to smooth the day into simpler pieces. The station, the steam, the narrow compartment, coffee in chipped cups, dried fish, the moose standing beside the track, white tablecloths glowing in the dining car. Each memory drifts past like another dark tree beyond the glass. The lamp flickers once, then steadies. Outside, night lies over the lowlands. Inside, the sleeper glows softly and carries you onward. While ice feathers the windows and the rails begin, little by little, to sound like a lullaby. The lullaby changes before you fully recognize it. At first, the difference is small. Snow brushes the glass with a little more force. The carriage gives a sharper sway. Wind presses against one side of the sleeper, then releases it, leaving the wooden panels to creak back into place. You remain beneath the wool blanket, listening. The wheels still strike the rails in their familiar rhythm, but another sound has entered beneath them. It begins as a distant rushing, low and constant, like surf heard from behind a closed door. Within minutes, it grows louder. The storm has found the train. You lift your head from the pillow, along the edge of this window. Powdery snow forces itself through a narrow gap and gathers in a thin white line on the sill. The amount is tiny, almost decorative, but it is also inside the carriage, which feels discourteous. A stronger gust strikes. The sleeper leans. Curtain rings rattle against their brass rod. Somewhere down the corridor, a glass falls and breaks. A passenger mutters in surprise. The child wakes and asks whether something has happened. His mother answers in the calm voice adults use when they do not yet know. Only the weather. Outside, the darkness has become a moving wall of white. You draw the curtain back and press close to the glass. The train's light catches snow rushing sideways in dense sheets. There is no longer any sense of open ground, forest, or sky. Everything beyond the window is motion. The flakes do not drift now, they attack. The locomotive whistle sounds ahead, but the note is torn apart by the wind. It reaches the sleeper in fragments, then vanishes. A conductor enters from the next car, closes the connecting door firmly, and tests the latch twice. Snow covers his shoulders. Meltwater runs from the edge of his cap. The porter looks up from a berth he has been fastening. Getting thick, he asks. The conductor removes one glove and rubs his fingers. Can't see much past the pilot. That answer travels through the carriage without anyone repeating it. The pilot, sometimes called the cowcatcher, is the angle frame fixed to the front of the locomotive. It is designed to push small obstructions away from the rails. Though in heavy snow it can become a plough of limited ambition. Proper rotary or wedge snow ploughs are far more effective, but they are not always attached to an ordinary passenger train when a storm arrives. You sit upright and pull on your shoes. Across the corridor, the travelling salesman has found his wandering pencil, but misplaced his confidence. He peers through the frosted glass, wipes it with his sleeve, and immediately steps back when another gust shakes the car. Is this usual, he asks. The older miner does not look up. For winter. For the train. The miner considers this. Also winter. The younger miner smiles into a blanket. The crew begins preparing with quiet efficiency. Doors are checked. Curtains are secured. Loose luggage is pushed deeper beneath seats. The porter places extra blankets near the occupied berths. He advises passengers to keep their coats close and not to stand in the vestibules. Nobody argues. Wind finds every seam in the carriage. It whistles faintly near the door frame and hums around the window fittings. The heating pipe knocks as though irritated by the pressure change. Snowstorms present several dangers to a railway. Drifts may cover the rails, switches can freeze, visibility collapses, and snow packed beneath the cars can interfere with moving parts. Ice may build around brake equipment. Telegraph wires can sag or break. Even when the locomotive has enough power to continue, the engineer may be unable to see signals or obstructions ahead. Railroad employees in Alaska learn to read snow almost as carefully as track. Fresh powder behaves differently from wet snow. Windblown drifts form rapidly in cuts and low places. A section of track that was clear an hour earlier may become buried to the railhead or beyond. The train may push through, slow down, or stop before weight and packed snow trap it completely. The carriage suddenly decelerates. Your body moves toward the foot of the berth, cups slide on tables. The salesman catches his newspaper against his chest. The wheels keep turning, but more slowly now. Their steady beat becomes separated and deliberate. Click, pause, click. The train is feeling its way forward. An unusual precaution in severe cold is to keep certain equipment moving or heated whenever possible. A stopped locomotive can become vulnerable if pipes freeze or steam pressure falls too far. Crews may work through the night simply to preserve heat, circulate water, and prevent machinery from becoming a rigid mass of iron and ice. The train is not merely carrying warmth, it must protect its own. The conductor passes again, this time with a lantern and a length of heavy cloth. He presses the cloth along the lower edge of the vestibule door where snow has begun to enter. The porter helps wedge it into the place. You ask whether the train might stop. It might, the conductor says. For long. He glances toward the ceiling as another gust roars across the roof. That depends on what stopped us. His honesty remains admirable in theory. The child sits wrapped in a blanket, watching the adults. His toy engine rests in his lap. The real train moves so slowly now that each turn of the wheels can be felt individually. Somewhere ahead, the locomotive bell begins ringing. Its steady clang reaches you through wind and steel. The sound is used as a warning, especially when visibility is poor or people may be working near the track. Tonight it seems strangely solemn. Each note emerges from the storm, hangs for a moment, and is swallowed. Accounts from railway workers describe storms in which crew members walked ahead of trains to inspect buried track or locate switches. Such work was dangerous, exhausting, and bitterly cold. Lantern light could disappear within yards. A person who stepped too far from the rails might lose direction in a landscape erased by snow. Writers disagree about whether Alaska's railroad crews were unusually heroic or simply workers forced by geography and limited resources to accept conditions that would halt trains elsewhere. The difference may depend on whether you are standing safely inside the sleeper or outside with a shovel. Tonight, you are inside. That feels important. The train slows again. For several breaths, it seems almost still. Wind pounds the carriage, snow rushes past the glass, and the engine works ahead with heavy, muffled exhausts, each one followed by a slight pull through the couplings. Then the wheels turn once more. The older miner nods toward the floor. She's climbing through it. You feel the locomotive gaining purchase, pushing into the drift one slow yard at a time. The sleeper trembles, wood creaks, metal groans beneath the strain. A curious habit among experienced winter passengers is to judge conditions by the behaviour of railway staff, rather than by the storm itself. If the porter jokes, the trouble is manageable. If the conductor removes his coat, the delay may be long. If everyone becomes very polite, concern is rising. The porter is still calm. He is no longer joking. You pull your coat from the hook and place it beside you. The wool is still slightly damp at the shoulders, but it offers reassurance. Around the sleeper, passengers settle into a quieter kind of wakefulness. Nobody returns fully to sleep. The salesman folds and unfolds his newspaper. The woman with the hat box warms her hands around the silver heater. The miners listen to the wheels. The storm continues to erase the world. Yet within the carriage, lamps remain lit. Steam continues through the pipes. Blankets are passed from hand to hand. The crew moves steadily from door to door, preparing for whatever waits beyond the next curtain of snow. Ahead, the bell keeps ringing. The locomotive presses forward into the blizzard, and the sleeper follows, rocking through a night that has lost every shape except wind, steel, and white. The white darkness thins just enough for shapes to return. At first, you see only the nearest snow, streaming past the glass in hard slanting lines. Then a darker mass appears beyond it, vast and motionless. The train rounds a curve, and the shape rises higher until it fills nearly the entire window. A mountain stands beside the railway. You cannot see its summit. Cloud and blowing snow have swallowed everything above the lower slopes. Still, the presence of it changes the feeling inside the sleeper. The frozen lowlands are behind you now. The track has entered narrower country. Pressed between steep ground and the waters of Turnagain Arm, the locomotive whistle sounds again. Its note returns from the mountainside as a faint echo, distorted by wind. You sit closer to the window. Though frost has reduced the view to a few imperfect patches, through one clear circle, you glimpse black water and pale ice beyond the track. Turnagain Arm stretches into darkness, an inlet shaped by tides, glacial silt, and the severe geography of the surrounding mountains. The shoreline bends sharply, so does the railway. Each curve passes through the train in sequence. The locomotive turns first, then the baggage cars, then the sleeper. Your berth tilts gently towards the window before settling back. Across the corridor, the older miner has abandoned any attempt at sleep. He sits upright with his coat folded beneath his head, listening to the engine. "Arm country," he says. The salesman looks up. "You can tell. You can feel the bends." The younger miner adds that you can also smell the salt when the wind comes from the water. You breathe in carefully. Beneath cold smoke and damp wool, there is indeed something sharper in the air, cold and mineral, though it may be imagination. Travel encourages the senses to become ambitious. The railway along Turnagain Arm is one of the most dramatic portions of the route between Anchorage and Seward. Track construction in this region required blasting cuts through rock, building along unstable slopes, and placing rails close to tidal water. Even under calm skies, the route demands attention. In a blizzard, every mile becomes a negotiation. The train slows as it enters a narrow cut. Rock rises close beside the window, coated with ice. Snow has gathered on ledges above. Small streams that run down the slope in warmer weather have frozen into pale curtains, their surfaces gleaming whenever the carriage lamps catch them. You hear loose snow strike the roof. A soft rush follows, then silence. The porter pauses in the corridor and looks upward. Nobody speaks for a moment. The sound has not been large enough to threaten the train, but it reminds everyone what lies above. Avalanche slopes line parts of the route. Snow collects on steep mountain faces until wind, warming, vibration, or the weight of additional snowfall causes it to release. A slide may begin as a narrow stream and gather speed, carrying snow, ice, trees, and rock toward the track below. Railroad crews study these slopes with practical suspicion. They look for fresh fractures in the snow, loaded gullies, bent trees, and places where previous slides have crossed the line. Knowledge comes through experience, reports, and sometimes unpleasant surprise. The conductor enters from the forward car and speaks quietly with the porter. You catch only pieces, drift near the cut, signal covered, section crew notified. The conductor notices that several passengers are listening. No immediate trouble, he says. This sentence contains the word immediate, which nobody finds especially soothing. The train moves forward at walking speed. Outside, the beam from the locomotive searches the track ahead. Through the blowing snow, it reveals brief sections of rail, dark rock, and white slopes. Then the curve hides the engine from your view again. Telegraph lines continue beside the track, though some poles lean under ice. A wire has broken somewhere and hangs in a loose curve between two supports. It trembles each time the wind strikes. Communication along the railroad is essential, especially in weather that can isolate crews within minutes. Stations and section houses relay information about track condition, delayed trains, equipment failures, and snow slides. When wires fail, messages must move by train, runner, or whatever method remains possible. One overlooked detail of railway maintenance is the role of section crews stationed at intervals along the line. These workers inspect track, clear switches, replace damaged ties, and watch for hazards. Their work is repetitive on calm days and dangerous during storms. Passengers may never learn their names, yet the safe passage of the train depends on them. The sleeper jolts. A muffled thump travels beneath the floor. The wheels grind briefly, and the train stops. No dramatic announcement follows. That makes the stillness more noticeable. Without the rhythm of the rails, the storm sounds larger. Wind pushes against the carriage sides. Snow scratches the glass. Steam knocks in the heating pipe, somewhere ahead. The locomotive exhausts slowly, keeping pressure alive. The conductor steps outside. The door opens for only a second, but cold air floods the corridor. Snow swirls around his boots before the porter forces the door shut behind him. Passengers wait. The child sleeps through the stop, wrapped in 2 blankets. His toy engine has slipped beneath his arm. His mother watches the corridor, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The travelling salesman checks his watch, then remembers that time is not currently in charge. The miners do not appear worried. They simply listen. After several minutes, lantern light moves past the window. A railway worker walks beside the train, bent against the wind. Snow reaches nearly to his knees in places. He carries a long pole and probes the drift along the rail. Another figure follows with a shovel. Their coats are crusted white. The first worker disappears toward the locomotive. The second begins clearing packed snow from beneath a wheel assembly farther ahead. A curious feature of heavy snow travel is that the deepest danger may not be visible from inside the train. Snow can pack tightly beneath brake rigging, around switches, or between moving components. What looks like harmless powder from a window may freeze into a dense mass capable of damaging equipment. You think of the warm dining car, the white cloths, and the careful cups filled only halfway. Comfort now seems like a very thin arrangement. Outside, men are digging beside a mountain in a blizzard so that your blankets may continue moving north. There is continuing debate over how much early railway success in Alaska depended on engineering skill and how much depended on exhausting manual labour. Plans, bridges, locomotives, and government funding mattered greatly, but so did workers with shovels, lanterns, picks, and frozen hands. The grand story of construction often looks cleaner than the nightly reality of keeping a line open. A whistle signal sounds from the locomotive, one short note, then another. Lanterns answer along the train, the conductor return. Covered in snow, his eyelashes are rimmed with ice, and his cheeks have reddened sharply. "Small drift," he says. "We'll move shortly." The porter helps brush snow from his coat. The conductor removes one glove and flexes his hand near the pipe. You ask whether there are avalanche warnings ahead. He looks toward the dark mountain outside. There are always slopes ahead. It's not quite an answer, but perhaps it is the only honest one. The locomotive pulls gently. Couplings tighten one after another. The sleeper shivers and begins to move. At first, the wheels turn slowly, pressing through packed snow. Then the rhythm returns, cautious but steady. The shoreline appears again between bursts of storm. To one side lies black water broken by ice. To the other, the mountain rises almost directly from the track. You travel through the narrow space between them, sheltered by neither far across the arm. Faint snowfields catch a little light from the clouded sky. They seem calm from this distance, smooth and untouched, up close. The wind tears at everything. The train rounds another curve. A low rumble moves through the mountain. Every conversation stops. You listen, holding your breath. But the sound fades without growing. Perhaps it is snow settling high above. Perhaps it is ice shifting. Perhaps only wind rolling through a ravine. Nobody offers a confident explanation. The porter walks once more through the sleeper, checking curtains and latches. His steps remain steady. You pull the blanket higher around your shoulders. The railway continues along the frozen edge of Turnagain Arm, beneath slopes that hold more snow than seems reasonable. Beside dark tidal water, through a storm that refuses to loosen its grip, and somewhere ahead, hidden by rock and white air, the next curve waits. The next curve arrives slowly, then seems to hold the train in place. You feel the locomotive pull, hesitate, and pull again. The wheels turn beneath the sleeper, but the movement is so slight that the mountain outside barely shifts. Snow presses across the track in fresh ridges. Wind pours down the slope and strikes the carriage's broadside, making the windows tremble in their frames. Then the train stops once more. This time, nobody asks us whether the pause will be brief. The conductor enters with snow melting from his shoulders and speaks to the porter in a voice intended to remain private. Privacy is difficult in a narrow railway car filled with wakeful strangers. Words travel easily through curtains. Drift ahead. How deep, deep enough? A few passengers exchange looks. The travelling salesman closes his watch with a small snap. He has checked it so often that everyone now knows the time without asking. The woman with the hat box adjusts her hand warmer. The miners remain seated near the heating pipe, calm but attentive. Outside, the locomotive continues breathing. Each exhaust rises through the storm with a heavy pulse. Steam drifts past the windows, momentarily whitening glass already covered in snow. The engine is alive and warmer, but it cannot simply charge forward without knowing what lies beneath the drift. You pull your coat around your shoulders and sit beside the others. The sleeper has become a waiting room without a station. At first, people maintain the quiet politeness of strangers delayed in public. Nobody complains loudly. Nobody asks questions likely to produce unpleasant answers. The porter distributes another pot of coffee, and cups pass carefully from hand to hand. The coffee is darker than before and tastes as though it has been thinking about revenge. You drink it anyway. The child wakes beneath his blankets and asks why the train is not moving. His mother tells him that snow is covering the track. He considers this. Can't the train go round? The older miner looks toward the window. Not much room. The child studies the mountain on one side and the black suggestion of water on the other. He accepts the explanation with more grace than most adults. A deck of cards appears from the younger miner's coat. The cards are softened at the corners and stained by years of fingers. Camp tables. And spilled drinks, he shuffles them with practiced ease. The salesman looks interested despite himself. What game 7-card stud? The woman with the hat box raises one eyebrow. For money, for buttons, unless you have loose gold, they use coat buttons, matches, and small coins as stakes. You join them at a folding table while the train rocks in the wind. The cards slide slightly whenever the carriage shifts, so each player keeps one hand near the centre to prevent the entire game from migrating towards the floor. Card playing has long accompanied railway travel because it fills uncertain hours without requiring much space. By the early 20th century, passengers carried compact decks, travel chess sets, puzzle books, and newspapers for journeys that might extend far beyond the printed schedule. On remote lines, entertainment is less a luxury than a defence against impatience. The salesman proves overly confident. He studies every hand with dramatic concentration, then loses 3 matches to the woman with the hat box. She smiles politely. Unfortunate. He studies her face, searching for signs of mockery. There are several. The child watches from his berth until his mother produces a biscuit from a wrapped packet. He eats slowly, gathering crumbs across the blanket. The porter passes and notices, but chooses mercy. Minutes stretch, wind rises and falls. Lanterns move outside as crew members walk toward the obstruction. Through a cleared patch of glass, you see 2 figures carrying shovels. Another follows with a long metal bar. They lean into the storm and disappear beyond the front of the train. Conversation becomes easier once the card game begins. The younger miner tells a story about a boarding house in Fairbanks where the walls were so thin that every guest knew when someone turned over in bed. The salesman counters with a tale about a hotel in Portland where the proprietor charged extra for hot water but neglected to mention that the water would arrive in a bucket. The woman with the hat box describes crossing part of Alaska by dog sled several winters earlier. She remembers the silence more than the cold. Nothing moves unless it has a reason, she says. You look toward the storm tonight. Everything seems to be moving without one. A curious custom among stranded travellers is the gradual creation of a temporary household. Food is shared, seats are rearranged, children are watched by people who met them only hours earlier. Someone produces a needle to repair a glove, someone else lends a scarf. Formal introductions may still be incomplete, yet practical cooperation arrives quickly. The older miner opens his dried fish pouch again. The salesman offers a tin of peppermints. The mother contributes biscuits. You find a small package of nuts in your bag and place it on the table. Nobody has enough to call it a meal. But together the pieces begin to resemble hospitality. The delay also loosens gossip. Passengers speculate about the track ahead. One claims an avalanche has buried the line. Another says a switch has frozen. A railway clerk from the next car reports that the crew is clearing a drift no higher than a man's waist. How tall a man, the salesman asks. Nobody knows. Accounts differ over whether delays on early Alaskan trains were accepted with unusual patience or remembered patiently only after the journey ended. Diaries and memoirs often turn hardship into adventure, especially when written beside a warm stove years later. A 5-hour delay becomes charming. Frozen boots become amusing. Fear becomes atmosphere. Living through the delay is less literary. The heating pipes remain warm, but not as hot as before. The porter checks them several times. He opens a valve with a cloth wrapped around his hand and listens to the change in pressure. The older miner notices, losing heat managing it. The porter replies, "This distinction is not comforting, though it is professionally phrased." The train gives a sudden lurch forward, cards scatter. The salesman catches 2, the woman with the hat box catches 4, one slides beneath the berth. Everyone waits, the locomotive pulls for several seconds, then the sleeper settles back into stillness. The younger miner looks at the missing card. "Queen of clubs," he says. "How do you know you ask? She always leaves when things get difficult." The joke is weak. It helps anyway. An hour may have passed, perhaps less. Without the motion of the train, time becomes difficult to judge. The storm remains constant, and the windows reveal no landmarks. Your pocket watch insists that minutes are continuing. But the carriage feels suspended. Tempers begin to show at the edges. The salesman complains that railway officials should have anticipated the weather. The railway clerk reminds him that weather is commonly anticipated but rarely obedient. A man from the forward coach demands to speak with the conductor. When the conductor appears, the man asks for an exact departure time. As soon as the line is clear, that is not exact. It is exact enough for the line. The man retreats, unsatisfied but defeated. The conductor stays in the sleeper long enough to warm his hands. He explains that the drift has formed inside a cut, where wind funnels snow between rock walls. The crew is digging a path and checking that no heavier slide has come down beyond it. You ask whether help is nearby. A section crew is working from the other side. 2 groups, then digging toward each other through the night. The image settles over the carriage. Outside, unseen men lift shovels again and again. Snow fills the spaces they clear. Lantern flames shake in the wind. Gloves stiffen. Breath freezes around scarves. Inside, buttons and matches remain scattered across the table. You resume the card game not because anyone cares who wins, but because the small rituals matter. Deal, bet, turn a card, sip coffee, listen for movement. Pretend that waiting is an activity rather than an absence. Gradually, laughter returns. The child falls asleep again. The woman with the hat box wins the final hand and gathers a fortune of buttons she has no intention of keeping. She returns them one by one, even giving the salesman an extra match out of pity. Then a whistle sounds ahead. One long note, followed by 2 short calls. The conductor rises immediately. Outside, lanterns begin moving back along the train. The locomotive pulls. This time, the wheels grip and continue turning. Snow grinds beneath the cars. Couplings tighten. The sleeper shudders through the newly opened path while everyone remains silent. Listening to the train proves that it can still move. The mountain begins sliding past the window again. The delay has ended, though the storm has not. You gather the cards, the cups, and the remaining biscuits. Strangers settle back into their berths with less distance between them than before, carrying the quiet knowledge that, for one snowbound hour, the sleeper has belonged to all of you. The train continues only a short distance before slowing again, but this time the change feels deliberate rather than defeated. The locomotive eases forward, then stops beside a small section house half buried in snow. A yellow lamp glows behind one window near the track. Several men wait with shovels, iron bars, lanterns, and scarves wrapped high across their faces. The conductor opens the vestibule door. Cold surges through the sleeper with such force that the nearest curtain lifts from the wall. Snow enters in a sparkling cloud, settles across the floorboards, and begins melting beneath the porter's boots. Outside, voices call through the wind. You cannot hear every word, but the tone is brisk and practical. Nobody sounds surprised. For railway workers in this country, a blizzard is not a dramatic interruption to ordinary life. It is ordinary life wearing heavier boots. The section crew divides quickly. 2 men walk toward the front of the train to inspect the drift that has already been cleared. Another kneels beside a switch nearly hidden under packed snow. He drives the point of an iron bar into the frozen mechanism and leans against it with his full weight. Metal strikes metal. The sound rings sharply through the storm. You stand near the window, wrapped in your coat, watching frost gather around the circle your sleeve has cleared from the glass. The switch worker scrapes away ice, then signals for a lantern. A second man holds the light close while the first examines the rails. Snow immediately begins filling the shallow trench around their boots. Railway switches are vulnerable in winter, because even a thin layer of packed ice can prevent the moving rails from closing properly. If the points fail to sit tightly against the stock rail, a wheel may take the wrong path. That is not a charming little inconvenience. It is the sort of mechanical disagreement everyone prefers to settle before several hundred tons of train arrive. The crew uses brooms, shovels, scrapers, and heat to free the moving parts. One man brings a metal pot from the section house. Steam rises from it as he pours hot water carefully along the frozen joint. The younger miner watches from behind you. "That can freeze again," he says. The older miner joins him. "It will." Neither man sounds critical. They are simply acknowledging winter's commitment to repetition. A worker then spreads coarse salt and cinders around the mechanism to improve traction and slow the return of ice. Another tests the switch by throwing the lever back and forth. At first it resists. Then it moves with a heavy clunk. The conductor raises his lantern. The worker answers with his own. Farther ahead, the fireman remains busy feeding coal into the locomotive. Even while the train stands still, the engine must maintain steam. Smoke rises in thick black folds, bends beneath the wind and sweeps along the train. Fine cinders tap against the window. Keeping a steam locomotive alive in severe cold requires constant judgment. Too little fire means falling pressure and frozen equipment. Too much fire wastes coal and may strain the boiler. Water levels must be watched carefully. Lubricants thicken, metal contracts, pipes that behave perfectly in the mild weather become temperamental when the temperature drops far below freezing. You hear a deep hiss from beneath the sleeper. The porter looks down immediately. Steam curls along the track beside the car, pale against the dark. He opens a small access panel near the floor and checks a valve. His hand is protected by a folded cloth. Though he still moves cautiously, the heating system depends on steam passing from car to car through connected lines. Those couplings can leak, freeze, or separate if not monitored. The heat beneath your berth has been fading. Now you understand why. The porter tightens something inside the panel, waits, and listens. A low knocking begins inside the pipe, then warmth slowly returns beneath your boots. He closes the panel. "There," he says. The salesman, standing nearby in his coat and nightshirt, asks whether the problem is fixed for now. The man looks unhappy with this temporary answer. The porter looks amused by the idea that any answer in winter could be permanent. One rarely mentioned part of railway labour involves crawling beneath or between cars to inspect brakes, hoses, bearings, and couplings in conditions that make bare metal dangerous to touch. A glove can freeze against a wet surface. A tool dropped in deep snow may disappear at once. Wind funnels beneath the carriage, carrying loose ice into a worker's face. You see one such worker now. He lies on a folded sack beside the track, partly beneath the baggage car. A lantern rests near his shoulder. Another man stands watch, shielding the flame with his body. The worker reaches upward with a wrench. The wind lifts snow around his legs until they nearly vanish. You feel the cold through the window simply by looking at him. The mother across the aisle draws the child's blanket higher. The boy is awake again and watching the men outside with solemn concentration. "Why is he under there?" he asks. "To make sure the train is safe," she says. The child considers this, then holds his wooden engine more carefully. The brake system receives particular attention. Ice can interfere with linkages, hoses, and brake shoes. Snow packed around the wheels may melt from friction and refreeze when the train stops. Workers inspect each car for signs that a brake is dragging or failing to release. Dragging wheel can overheat. A frozen brake can refuse to act. Neither is ideal when the track curves along mountains and tidal water. The railway clerk from the next car enters the sleeper carrying a small ledger. He reports that the crew is checking every axle before continuing. The salesman groans. The clerk gives him a patient look. You may prefer they skip yours. The salesman decides that thoroughness is admirable. Not all the men working outside are permanent railway employees. During severe weather, local labourers, track gangs, station workers, and whoever else is available may be pressed into clearing snow. The railroad depends upon layers of human effort that rarely appear in promotional photographs. Some accounts celebrate the Northern Railway as a triumph of machinery over wilderness. Others place the emphasis elsewhere, arguing that the line survives only because people repeatedly perform exhausting manual tasks that machinery cannot finish alone. From where you stand, watching shovels rise and fall beneath lantern light, the second view feels difficult to ignore. The locomotive suddenly releases a cloud of steam. It rolls backward along the train, hiding the workers for several seconds. When the vapour thins, you see them still moving. One man chops ice from a wheel with a short hammer. Another clears the step beneath a carriage door. A third carries a bucket of sand toward the locomotive. Sand is fed onto the rails to improve traction when steel wheels slip on ice or packed snow. The engine has great weight. But weight alone does not guarantee grip. Sometimes the difference between movement and helpless spinning is a dry stream of grit beneath the driving wheels. A strangely practical trick among crews is to warm tools near the locomotive before using them, though not so much that handles become slippery or metal parts expand unpredictably. Even a wrench may need preparation before facing the night. The older miner points toward the men at the front. They'll check the water lines next. Sure enough, two workers move alongside the locomotive tender, examining pipes and fittings. Water is the engine's lifeblood. But in this cold, it's also a constant threat. Any exposed line can freeze. A tank may hold thousands of gallons, yet a narrow pipe can still become blocked by a plug of ice. The fireman climbs down from the cab, his face red from furnace heat. For a moment, steam rises from his clothes as snow melts against them. He's been working beside a blazing firebox, and now he stands in a blizzard. The contrast must feel almost unreal. He speaks with the engineer, then crouches beside one of the driving wheels. A lantern passes between them. Inside the sleeper, the lamps burn steadily. The card table remains folded. Empty coffee cups sit in a tray. Blankets hang over knees and shoulders. Everything warm and orderly around you depends on those figures outside. At last. The worker beneath the baggage car slides back into view. Snow clings to his coat. He sits up slowly, flexes his fingers and signals that the inspection is complete. One by one, lanterns begin moving toward the section house. The switch is tested again. The brake lines are checked. The steam connection holds. The conductor returns through the vestibule with ice crusted across his cap. He stamps snow from his boots and closes the door firmly. "Ready," he says. No passenger applauds. The word is too quiet for that. The locomotive whistle gives 2 short calls. Sand falls onto the rails, steam pressure rises. The couplings tighten along the train with a sequence of heavy knocks. Outside, the workers stand beside the track, their lanterns raised. The sleeper moves forward. You watch the section house slide past, its yellow window shrinking behind curtains of snow. The men remain in the storm, already turning back toward the switch. Because winter will cover their work again soon enough, the train carries you onward. Warm only because they refuse to let the cold wind quickly. The yellow window of the section house disappears behind the storm, and the raised lanterns shrink into faint sparks before the snow closes over them. The train moves carefully at first, each wheel turning with effort through the newly cleared track. Then the locomotive finds a steadier grip, and the familiar rhythm begins to build beneath the sleeper. You remain by the window for several minutes. There is nothing left to see except white motion and your own dim reflection. The mountain, the section house, the workers, and the shoreline have all vanished. Even the sparks from the engine are swallowed almost as soon as they appear. The porter walks through the car and lowers several lamps. "Best get some rest while we're moving," he says. The phrase "while we're moving" is not as reassuring as he intends. Still, the hour has grown late, and your body has begun to feel every stage of the journey. Your shoulders ache from balancing against the sway. Your eyes sting from smoke and interrupted sleep. The warm meal in the dining car now seems to have happened days ago. You remove your coat but keep it within reach. Your shoes go beneath the berth with their toes facing outward. Gloves rest beside the pillow. The rough wool blanket is pulled over the sheet. Then another blanket above it. Preparation for sleep in a railway berth is less a graceful ritual and more a small military campaign. Everything must be placed where it can be found in darkness. Your ticket remains inside the coat pocket. Your watch is secured in the bag. Your hat is wedged behind the pillow so that the motion of the train cannot send it exploring. You draw the curtain closed. At once, the compartment becomes smaller and quieter. The fabric does not silence the storm, but it softens the human noises beyond it. Conversations dissolve into murmurs. Footsteps pass as faint vibrations. The glow from the corridor reaches you through a narrow gap at the curtain's edge. You lie down. The mattress is firm, the pillow thin, and the berth narrow enough to discourage ambitious movement. Your shoulder touches the wall. Your knees nearly reach the partition at the foot. Turning over requires planning, negotiation, and perhaps approval from the railway administration. The train rocks left, then right. A pipe beneath the berth knocks 3 times. The storm answers with a long moan around the window frame. Railway passengers of this era often describe the motion of a sleeper as soothing once they become accustomed to it. The regular beat of wheels and the gentle sideward sway can resemble a cradle, yet tracks in remote country are not always smooth, and winter adds its own corrections. Frost can lift the ground beneath the rails. Packed snow changes resistance. Curves and grades shift the balance of each car. The result is a cradle designed by someone with a mild grudge. You close your eyes. Click, click, pause, click, click. The rhythm begins to draw you downward. Then the carriage strikes a rough joint. Your pillow jumps. Your eyes open. From the berth above comes a startled cough, followed by the sound of someone resettling with great care. The supporting straps creak. You look upward even though the ceiling of your berth blocks the view. The idea of another passenger sleeping directly above you has not seemed important until now. A small object rolls along the corridor floor outside. It reaches one end of the car, stops, then returns as the train leans the other way. Perhaps it is a coin, Perhaps the salesman's pencil has resumed its travels. You pull the blanket higher. The wool scratches your chin. It smells faintly of soap, dust, and many previous winters. Railway bedding is washed and reused, but fabric holds traces of service. Smoke settles into fibres, coal soot finds seams, blankets absorb the warm, dry scent of heated cars and the colder scent of storage rooms. One unusual complaint in travellers' letters concerns not noise but silence, when a train stops unexpectedly at night. Experienced passengers often wake at once because the rhythm has disappeared. Motion becomes normal. Stillness becomes the warning. You understand that now. As long as the wheels continue speaking beneath you, the journey feels safe enough. The storm roars outside, but the train answers with machinery. Steam pulses from the locomotive. Couplings strain and settle. Wheels strike steel. The heating pipes tick as they expand. You begin to drift again. Images rise without order. A moose stands beside the track. White tablecloths shine beneath dining car lamps. A worker lies beneath the baggage car with snow gathering around his boots. The woman with the hat box collects a pile of buttons from the card game. Then the blizzard enters the dream and erases them all. A sharper gust presses against the sleeper. The window gives a faint rattle. Cold air touches your cheek through a narrow seam beside the curtain. You reach toward it and find the edge of the glass rimmed with ice. Frost has advanced farther across the pane, thick enough now to hide nearly everything outside. You tuck a folded scarf along the lower frame. It is a simple barrier, but the draft weakens. Travellers in cold regions often improvise in this way, using spare clothing, newspapers, blankets, or towels to block air leaks. Railway cars may be heated, yet no carriage remains perfectly sealed. Cold enters through doors, windows, ventilation openings, and connecting vestibules. Comfort depends partly on the equipment and partly on the passenger's talent for stuffing fabric into inconvenient gaps. The porter passes once more. You hear him pause beside your curtain. "All right in there." You answer softly. He continues toward the next berth, asking the same question in a different tone, to the mother and child. His voice is gentle, to the miners, brief, to the salesman, patient. His work does not end when the beds are made. Throughout the night, he watches the heating system, assists passengers, checks doors, and wakes those approaching their stops. The calm atmosphere of the sleeper rests on labour that continues while everyone else attempts to forget where they are. Interpretations differ on whether sleeping car service represented genuine luxury or carefully staged comfort built upon demanding and unequal work. Passengers remember linen, curtains, polished wood, and attentive care. Employees remember long hours, limited rest, and constant responsibility. Both memories occupy the same carriage. You listen to the porter's footsteps fade. The train takes another curve. Your body rolls gently toward the wall, held in place by the narrow mattress. The upper berth creaks, somewhere beyond the curtain. The child murmurs in his sleep. The storm strikes the roof in waves. At times, the sound resembles handfuls of sand thrown against metal. At others, it becomes a deep rushing that seems to surround the entire car. Wind enters the spaces between carriages and produces a low whistle that rises and falls like a distant voice. You tell yourself it is only air passing through steel. The explanation is accurate. It is not especially comforting. The locomotive sounds its whistle ahead. The note is faint from inside the berth, but it travels through the train's frame. You feel it as much as hear it. A soft vibration beneath the pillow. Perhaps the engineer is approaching a crossing, perhaps workers are near the line. Perhaps he is warning the darkness itself, which has been standing stubbornly in the way for several hours. Your breathing slows. The wool blanket grows warmer around you. The scratchiness becomes less noticeable. The mattress seems to soften, though it almost certainly has not. Outside, The blizzard continues with all the patience of weather that has nowhere else to be. Inside, each passenger occupies a narrow-curtained world. A watch ticks, a pipe taps, a lantern bracket trembles. The wheels repeat their measured phrase beneath you. You begin to lose the spaces between the sounds. The storm becomes part of the rhythm. The rhythm becomes part of your breathing. Your last clear thought is that sleeping on a train requires trust in people you cannot see. The engineer ahead, the fireman beside the furnace, the conductor moving between cars, the porter listening to the pipes, the workers left behind with their lanterns and frozen switch. The sleeper rocks once more. This time, you do not resist it. You settle deeper into the berth while wind moans around the carriage. Blankets press heavily over your chest, and the train carries your drifting thoughts north through the storm. Sleep does not arrive as a clean descent. It comes in loose pieces, stitched together by wheels, wind, and the uncertain warmth beneath your blanket. One moment you are aware of the berth pressing against your shoulder. The next, you are walking beside a river under a pale sky. Though you do not remember leaving the train, the dream borrows its rhythm from the rails. Click, click. Snow shifts beneath your boots. Click, click. Spruce trees lean toward you, their branches heavy and dark. Then the landscape tilts, and you realize you are still inside the sleeper, lying on your side while the carriage rounds another bend. Your eyes open briefly. A thin strip of corridor light glows beside the curtain. The heating pipe gives a tired knock. Somewhere above, the passenger in the upper berth turns over and exhales through the wall of fabric and wood. You close your eyes again. Now the train seems to move through a wide valley where the storm has softened. The Susitna River lies somewhere nearby, broad and frozen at the surface. Though water may still be moving beneath the ice, you cannot see its full shape from the window. You catch only pale openings between trees, smooth stretches of snow, and occasional dark lines that may be banks, channels, or shadows. The railway follows river valleys because rivers have already found paths through difficult country. Engineers study grades, bends, stable ground, and crossing points, but the broad direction is often decided long before them by water, ice, and geology. You feel the train leaning into those older paths in your half-sleep. The valley expands beyond the carriage walls. You imagine cabins standing far from the track, their windows dim behind frost. Smoke rises from stovepipes and bends beneath the wind. Sled dogs curl into the snow, tails wrapped over their noses. Inside, people mend harness, dry mittens, sharpen tools, and listen for sounds carried across the frozen night. The whistle reaches them before the train does. A long note passes over the valley. Perhaps someone lifts a curtain and sees only darkness. Perhaps a child counts the seconds until the locomotive appears. Perhaps an older resident barely looks up, having learned that trains announce themselves with confidence whether or not anyone is watching. The line crosses lands inhabited and travelled by indigenous peoples for countless generations in the region around the Susitna Valley. Dena'ina communities hold deep knowledge of rivers, seasonal movement, fishing places, hunting grounds, plants, weather, and routes through country that newcomers often describe as empty. It is not empty. The quiet around you contains histories that railway maps rarely explain. The train may mark stations and mileposts, yet local paths exist beyond the view from your berth. Winter trails follow frozen waterways. Camps stand near reliable resources. Knowledge passes through families, stories, practice, and memory. In your drifting state, you see figures moving across the river with snowshoes. Not hurried, not lost. They understand the surface beneath them. They recognize where ice is strong, where currents weaken it, where overflow water may rise through cracks and freeze in deceptive layers. The railway passengers call the landscape remote. That word depends on where you begin. Your dream shifts again. A lantern swings beside the track. Small flag stop appears from the snow, no more than a platform, a shed, and several figures waiting with bundles. The train slows, though you do not feel the brakes. A woman passes up a sack of mail. A man loads a wooden crate. Someone embraces a passenger quickly, because the cold punishes long farewells. Then the train moves on. Minor stops along northern railways serve as points of exchange rather than grand stations. Freight, letters, tools, food, and people pass through them in small quantities that matter greatly. A single crate may contain medicine for a settlement. One envelope may carry news that has taken weeks to arrive. A curious feature of remote railway service is that trains sometimes stop for remarkably informal reasons. A raised flag, an agreed signal, or prior notice may be enough at certain points. Timetables provide structure, but local practice fills the gaps in the dream. Someone waves a red scarf beside the line. The locomotive stops. A dog boards. Nobody explains why. This seems perfectly reasonable until you wake for a moment and wonder whether it happened. The sleeper is darkest now. The corridor lamp has been lowered further. The storm continues, but its voice seems farther away, perhaps because the train has entered more sheltered ground. You listen for the dog. There is no dog. Only the salesman snoring softly behind his curtain. You turn onto your back. The roof feels very close above you. The berth seems both protective and confining. A little shelf of warmth moving through an enormous night. Outside. The Susitna country continues northward. Forest, river, muskeg, and low ridges pass beyond the frosted glass. In summer, water and insects dominate much of this ground. In winter, snow covers the unevenness and makes the country appear simple. It is not simple either. Frozen rivers can serve as roads, but they can also break, flood, shift, and hide weak places. Snow makes travel possible while concealing hazards. Cold preserves food and hardens trails while threatening skin. Animals, equipment, and breath. People who live here do not merely endure winter, they organize life around it. Historians and anthropologists continue to question how railway development changed communities along the route. Some emphasize access to markets, wages, mail, and supplies. Others focus on pressure upon traditional lands, altered settlement patterns, outside authority, and economic dependence. The effects are not neatly divided into benefit or harm, they arrive together. Like warmth and smoke from the same stove, you drift deeper. The train becomes a dark line crossing a white map. Stations appear as small lights. Anchorage glows behind you. Talkeetna waits ahead. Farther north, Nenana and Fairbanks sit beneath colder stars. Between them lie miles that refuse to become blank space, no matter how maps simplify them. You dream of the moose again. It stands beside the frozen river this time, taller than before, watching the train pass. Snow rests on its bow's back. Behind it, spruce trees fade into blue darkness. The animal turns away. A cabin appears where it stood. Then the cabin becomes the dining car, and the woman with the hat box is serving dried fish on white china while the conductor announces that the river has missed its connection. Dream logic is very efficient. It wastes no time on explanation. The wheels strike a bridge. The sound beneath you suddenly becomes hollow and loud. You wake for several seconds. The entire sleeper trembles over open structure. The clatter rises through the mattress and into your ribs. Beneath the train, unseen water or ice lies in darkness. Then the sound changes again as the wheels return to solid ground. The bridge is behind you. You remain awake long enough to hear the porter move through the corridor. His steps pause near the mother and child, then continue towards the end of the car. A door opens. Cold air whispers in, a door closes. You wonder how many rivers you have crossed without knowing their names. The railway labels them in reports and engineering plans. Local people know them through seasons, fish, currents, stories, and danger. Passengers may remember only the brief hollow thunder beneath the berth. Your eyes close once more. Now you are no longer certain whether the train is moving through the valley or the valley is sliding past you. Cabins drift between trees. Frozen channels shine beneath clouded moonlight. Distant settlements gather around stoves, lamps, kennels, and stores somewhere. A telegraph instrument clicks in a station office. Somewhere else, no wire reaches at all. The sleeper carries you along the narrow steel route between these worlds, close enough to glimpse them, too fast to understand them fully. Your breathing settles into the motion. The river bends, the track follows, the dream follows both. And through the last hours before morning, you pass half awake across the Susitna Valley, carried among frozen waterways, old homelands, remote cabins, and scattered lights that glow briefly before the northern darkness folds around them again. Morning arrives without sunlight. Instead, the darkness loosens by degrees, turning from black to charcoal, then from charcoal to a pale blue-grey that settles across the window like smoke. You wake beneath the wool blanket with no clear sense of the hour. The train is moving slowly, and the storm has changed its voice. The wind still travels along the carriage, but it no longer roars without pause. Gusts come in tired bursts. Snow brushes the glass more gently beneath you. The wheels strike the rails with a cautious, uneven rhythm. For a few moments you remain still. Your neck is stiff. One arm has fallen asleep beneath you. The blanket has twisted around your legs, and your hat has somehow migrated from behind the pillow to the foot of the berth. The railway has spent the night rearranging you according to its own preferences. You reach for the curtain and pull it aside. The sleeper looks different in morning light. Curtains hang crooked where passengers have shifted in sleep. Shoes rest in pairs or lie sattered beneath berths. Coats droop from hooks. The polished wood has lost some of its nighttime elegance and now shows scratches, fingerprints, and the dull film of coal smoke. The porter is already awake. Perhaps he has never slept at all. He moves along the corridor carrying a metal pot, filling cups for passengers who emerge from behind curtains with flattened hair and uncertain expressions. Steam rises from the coffee, mingling with the warmer breath of the carriage. You accept a cup. It smells stronger than last night's offering and tastes only slightly less determined to punish you. Still, the heat is welcome. You hold it close beneath your chin and look through the window. Daylight reveals what the storm concealed. Snow covers the railway embankment almost to the level of the lower steps. Drifts curl around telegraph poles and berry fences. Spruce trees stand heavily bowed, their branches carrying thick white loads. In open ground, wind has sculpted the snow into smooth ridges that resemble frozen waves. The entire landscape appears newly made. No footprints cross it. No road is visible. Only the railway remains, two dark lines cutting through the white. A station sign appears ahead, half hidden behind blowing powder. Talkeetna. The name passes slowly beside the window. In 1924, Talkeetna is not yet the busy visitor destination that later generations will know. It is a small railway settlement and supply point near the meeting of the Susitna-Schuletna and Talkeetna rivers. Its location makes it useful for transportation, trade, and access to mining country farther into the interior. The train enters the settlement at little more than walking speed. Snow lies deep around the buildings. A depot stands beside the track with a broad roof carrying several feet of white weight. Nearby are freight sheds, cabins, stacked timber, and a small cluster of businesses whose signs are difficult to read through frost. People wait on the platform. Some wear fur hats and long coats stiffened by cold. Others have scarves wrapped high over their mouths. Their breath rises in pale clouds. Several men hold shovels. A woman stands beside a wooden crate marked with dark lettering, one gloved hand resting on top as though preventing it from escaping. Dogs bark from somewhere beyond the station. The sound cuts clearly through the quiet morning. The locomotive bell begins to ring. Its measured clang announces the train to the settlement, though almost everyone appears to have been waiting long before it arrived. The brakes take hold. A low grinding passes beneath the sleeper. Steam drifts along the platform. The train stops with a final heavy knock between the couplings. For the first time in many hours, everything becomes still. You feel the absence of motion immediately. The floor no longer sways. The cup in your hand remains level. Your body, which has learned to adjust constantly through the night, seems confused by the sudden reliability of the ground. Passengers begin lifting curtains and searching for belongings. The salesman crawls halfway beneath his berth to recover the pencil that has travelled farther than he has. The woman with the hatbox smooths her coat and checks the silver hand warmer. The miners pull on their boots, exchanging few words. The child presses his face toward the glass. "There are dogs," he says. His mother gently draws him back from the frozen pane. The porter opens the vestibule door, and cold morning air enters the car. It carries the smell of wood smoke, coal, snow, and something frying in a nearby kitchen. That final scent wakes the entire carriage more effectively than coffee. Outside, railway workers inspect the train. Snow is packed around the lower parts of several cars. Men use short shovels to clear the steps and wheel assemblies. One walks slowly beside the sleeper, tapping metal with a hammer and listening to the sound that returns. A clear ring suggests solid. Cold metal. A dull response may indicate ice, damage, or another problem worth examining. Crews have long used sound as a quick form of inspection. Wheels, axles, and fittings can reveal trouble through changes in tone. It is not a substitute for careful maintenance, but experienced workers learn to hear mechanical warnings that passengers would never notice. You step down onto the platform. The cold takes your breath at once. After the heated sleeper, the morning air feels sharp enough to cut cloth. Your nostrils sting. The boards beneath your boots are packed with snow and scattered with cinders to reduce slipping. The locomotive stands ahead, coated in frost. Ice clings to handrails, pipes, and the front pilot. Snow is melted against the boiler, then frozen again in uneven ridges. Steam pours from beneath the engine and rolls across the platform, wrapping boots and baggage in warm mist before the cold tears it apart. The fireman leans from the cab window. His face looks exhausted. Soot marks his cheeks, his eyes are red from heat smoke, and a night without proper rest behind him. The firebox glows whenever the door opens. A worker climbs onto the tender to examine the coal supply. Another checks the water connection being prepared beside the track. Steam locomotives need to replenish water regularly, and cold makes the process difficult. Hoses stiffen, valves freeze, spilled water turns instantly treacherous beneath workers' feet. The crew places sand near the connection and moves with careful steps. A rarely mentioned winter nuisance is that a worker can become covered in ice simply by handling water near a steam engine. Spray settles on sleeves, gloves, eyebrows, and tools. Warm vapour feels pleasant for a second, then freezes when the wind catches it. You see this happen to a man beside the tender. He wipes his beard with one hand, and small crystals fall onto his coat. Near the freight shed, crates are unloaded. One contains canned food, another holds machine parts wrapped in straw. Mail sacks pass from the baggage car to a waiting sled. A local man signs a paper against the wall of the depot, struggling to control the pencil with thick gloves. The railway does not merely arrive in Talkeetna, it feeds the settlement. Yet the relationship is not simple. Some historical accounts treat the line as the force that created such towns, while others point out that indigenous routes, mining trails, river travel, and earlier seasonal camps gave these places meaning before rails reached them. The station changes movement and settlement, but it does not begin the story. You walk a short distance along the platform. Beyond the buildings, the land opens toward the rivers. Though snow and low cloud hide most of the view, Farther north, mountains should rise against the horizon. This morning they are invisible. The storm has erased even their suggestion. A bell rings from the depot. Passengers are told to return aboard. You climb the steps, brushing snow from your coat before entering the warmth. The sleeper smells stronger now after the clean cold outside. Coffee, blankets, damp leather, and human breath gather in the narrow space. The porter begins folding berths back into daytime seats. Mattresses vanish behind panels, sheets are gathered. Curtains slide open. The private worlds of the night become a public carriage again. You settle by the window with a fresh cup of coffee. Outside, workers lift their lanterns despite the growing daylight. The water connection is removed. Freight doors close. Mail is secured. The locomotive releases a powerful burst of steam. Dogs bark again near the edge of the settlement. Then the couplings tighten. Talkeetna begins to move backward, beyond the glass. Its depot, sleds, cabins, and bundled figures fading into pale morning snow. The train turns north once more. Behind you, the platform grows small. Ahead, the rails climb toward rougher country, and the exhausted crew carries you into a day that has barely begun. Talkeetna falls away behind the train, and the valley begins to narrow. At first, the change is subtle. The open spaces between spruce trees grow smaller. Low ridges rise beside the track. The rails curve more often. Following ground that has become less willing to offer a straight path north. You sit by the window with your cup between both hands. Morning light remains thin and colourless. Snow clouds hang low over the country, hiding the higher peaks every so often. The veil lifts just enough to reveal a dark shoulder of the mountain, immense and close, before blowing white closes around it again. The train begins to climb. You feel the grade through the locomotive's effort. Its exhaust becomes slower and heavier, each pulse carrying backward through the cars. The wheels maintain their rhythm, but the engine no longer seems to glide. It grips, pushes, and lifts the weight behind it yard by yard. Coal smoke rolls past the window. Fine cinders strike the glass like dry seeds. In the cab, the fireman must feed the furnace more aggressively. A climbing locomotive consumes fuel with impressive appetite. Steam pressure cannot be allowed to fall while the engine works against gravity. Cold rails and fresh snow. You imagine the firebox door opening. Orange light fills the cab. A shovel enters the coal, then another. The fireman's face burns with heat while frost gathers outside the windows. Few workplaces can offer summer and winter at the same time with such enthusiasm. The sleeper tilts gently around a curve. Below the track, a narrow stream lies frozen between steep banks. Snow covers most of its surface, but dark ice appears in patches where wind has swept it clean. Farther ahead, the rails cross the water on a timber bridge. The train slows before reaching it. The conductor stands near the vestibule window, watching the structure approach. Railway bridges in this country endure freezing, thawing, moving water, drifting ice, and pressure from heavy trains. Their supports must remain stable even as the ground around them changes through the seasons. The locomotive reaches the bridge first. A deep booming rises beneath the cars. You feel each wheel pass over the joints. The sound is hollow, louder than on solid ground, and it seems to come from far below the floor. You look through the glass. Timber braces flicker past in quick dark lines. Beneath them, the frozen stream lies quiet and pale. Snow fills the spaces along its banks. A few bent willows reach through the white surface like thin fingers. Then the bridge is behind you. The wheels return to the firmer clatter of track laid over earth and gravel. Construction of the Alaska Railroad required hundreds of bridges, trestles, cuts, fills, and drainage works. The line could not simply rest on the land, it had to cross water, hold its grade against slopes, and survive ground that shifted with frost. Engineers planned the route, but much of the work was done by labourers using picks, drills, wheelbarrows, horses, steam equipment, and explosives. The polished sleeper gives little hint of that effort. You see only the result beneath you. A narrow ribbon of steel continuing into the mountains. The track enters a cut blasted through rock. Stone rises close on both sides. Layers of ice cling to the walls, milky blue in the dim morning. Snow has gathered along the upper edges, forming overhanging shelves. The porter glances upward as loose powder slides from one ledge and brushes across the roof. The child waves through the station crowd before disappearing with his mother. The woman with the hat box enters a waiting sled. The salesman negotiates loudly with a porter over his cases. The miners are already walking away for a night. All of you shared warmth, coffee, cards, delays, and the sound of the storm. Now the railway releases you into separate lives. Later writers will disagree about what this steel route means for Alaska. Some will call it an engineering triumph and a public lifeline. Others will emphasize federal ambition, resource extraction, and the disruption of lands whose histories began long before survey stakes appeared. The train carries all those meanings together. It brings medicine and machinery. It carries families and officials. It opens opportunities and invites pressure. History rarely arrives in a single clean package, even when the package is listed properly on a freight manifest. You lift your bag and walk toward the station door. Before entering, you pause once more. Steam rises around the sleeper, softening its outline. Snow begins falling again, but only lightly now. Flakes settle on the platform, the roofs, the locomotive, and your coat. The long journey loosens its hold on you. The roar of the blizzard becomes a distant memory. The hard clatter of the wheels fades beneath quieter sounds. Boots crossing snow, a horse shifting in harness, a baggage cart rolling over boards, and a stove crackling somewhere inside the depot. You breathe slowly. The cold no longer presses against a narrow window. It rests across the town, wide and still. While warm rooms wait behind doors, you remember the berth rocking beneath you, the wool blanket drawn to your chin, and the whistle travelling through frozen darkness. You remember lanterns beside the track, hands clearing snow, steam curling around tired workers. All of it begins to soften now. The station light glows through frosted glass. You step inside, where warmth gathers gently around your coat and the sounds of the platform become muted. Your bag rests beside you. Your journey is finished. Outside, the train waits beneath the quiet northern sky, and snow drifts down in slow, weightless circles. Your breathing grows deeper. Your shoulders loosen. The rails stretch southward behind you, fading through valleys, forests, mountains, and night. You no longer need to follow them. You can let the locomotive rest. You can let the lamps grow dim. You can let the last whistle travel farther and farther away until it becomes only a soft note at the edge of sleep. The platform empties, the snow covers every footprint. And in the stillness of Fairbanks, beneath a pale winter evening, you close your eyes and allow the frozen north to become quiet at last. Sweet dreams.